Primitive War. A novel by Ethan Pettis. Read by Wayne June. Chapter 8. Hunted. The heart of the jungle was primordial and untamed. The roots of towering banyan trees gripped the earth like the knuckle-deep hands of giants. Listless serpentine vines, shaggy and green with moss, dangled from the treetops. Scant moonlight filtered through the layers of canopy. The ground was choked with vegetation. King ferns sprung 10 feet high, and waxy-leaved rubber plants grew intertwined with the lush banana trees and jagged palm fronds. Leon was amazed with the diversity of the jungle, the untouched splendor of pure wilderness. His jaw hung slack as he stared at the canopy and stepped over the wooden tendrils of a banyan's roots. "God," Leon whispered breathlessly. Ryan didn't share Leon's youthful sense of wonder. He walked slowly, feeling the rotting forest floor sink beneath his feet. He stared over the undergrowth, past the trees, to the mist lingering in the space beyond. The canopy was loud with the revelry of hornbill birds and chirping monkeys. He glanced to the treetops and saw the gleaming red eyes of a bearcat on an overhanging branch. The air smelt of mold and mildew, the decay of plant and animal matter. Ryan knew that for all its beauty, the jungle was an ecological temple of life, death, and rebirth. The nature of death, however, was at the forefront of his mind. For the past hour, Ryan's nerves had been gradually pulled taut like the strings of a puppet. Jericho's warning and the final journal entry of the Green Beret had formed a cyclical chant in his head. The question of what had been hunting the Green Beret filled Ryan with a limitless potential of phobias. He found himself scanning the shadows for any sign of a phantom, be it animal or man. Viet Cong guerrillas could have been stalking the Green Beret, but Ryan didn't think a Special Forces soldier would have felt that amount of fear from guerrillas in the brush. The Green Beret were hunters. Only a greater predator could scare a hunter. "We're being hunted." Ryan let go of his breath and loosened his grip on the rifle. The prospect of a man-eater cooled his blood. It tapped into a primitive instinct that sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. Ryan knew that in the jungle, even the most dangerous and heavily armed soldier was little more than a weak, fragile animal. It was a primal fear that Ryan had seen in the eyes of all men. Even Xavier, an expert hunter, would stand little chance of survival if he encountered an aggressive tiger or bear. Ryan understood that he and his men were vulnerable beings marching through the domain of monsters. They were at the mercy of the jungle. Ryan could see the anxiety in the eyes of his men, flicking left and right. Their silhouettes were hunched and slow-moving. Logan twitched his head in the direction of any sound he heard. Eli stood close to Miller, quietly chewing tobacco and spitting onto the forest floor. Xavier had the tense, crouched posture of a hunter. He fully understood the danger of the wilderness, and while he had a better grasp of the natural world than the others, he was just as aware of his vulnerability. The only person that seemed unaffected by fear was Leon, who was too naive to sense the true underlying danger that surrounded them. Ryan let go of his breath. He was getting too paranoid. He needed to keep his imagination at bay. Instead of focusing on the fear that they shared or the mysterious nature of their mission, Ryan tried to gain a better sense of his surroundings. He lowered his rifle and checked his compass, noting that they were going northeast. Clicking the compass shut, he glanced at its scratched silver surface and rubbed his thumb over the name engraved on its back, Adam McNeil. Ryan's former captain had always been level-headed in the jungle. McNeil had been native to the Green Mountains of North Carolina, so he was used to journeying through dense wilderness. When Ryan first joined Vulture Squad, he had been so easily frightened in the wild. He knew that imminent death could hide in any shadow or any shroud of vegetation. McNeil had taught Ryan to pay close attention to his surroundings, as the greatest clues the jungle gave you were provided by its own inhabitants. The behavior of the animals was an indicator of potential danger, he had been told. Ryan slipped the compass back into his pocket. He had been so lost in thought that he had failed to notice a perceptible shift in the atmosphere. The jungle was silent. Ryan's heartbeat fluttered, and he felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. The groaning frogs, chattering monkeys, and even the buzzing insects had fallen silent. Ryan glanced over his shoulder and saw that the others had slowed down as well upon noticing the silence. Logan and Gerald looked around with their rifles. Eli and Leon stared into the treetops. Xavier's nostrils flared. His eyes were wide. A soft breeze stirred the canopy, gently rustling through the palm fronds. Ryan raised his hand and made a circling motion for the others to get closer. They gathered around Ryan and aimed their rifles at the surrounding forest. Ryan led the way. The sudden entombing silence made their jostling equipment sound impossibly loud. Ryan looked up at the overhanging branches and saw that none of the animals were out. Not even the chirping tree frogs that usually sang throughout the night. He had never seen anything like it, the jungle so perfectly calm and quiet, as if it were holding its breath. It made his palms sweat. Ryan felt his pulse pounding in his ears. An anguished howl ripped through the canopy. Everybody stopped and swung their rifles in the direction of the cry. It was a painful and deranged scream that sent Ryan's hair on end, but he recognized it as a gibbon, a treetop ape. Ryan grunted and lowered his rifle. The scream faded to an echo that drifted aimlessly through the forest. No other creature returned the call. Ryan didn't see anything stirring in the jungle, so he turned and continued to lead the way. They moved quickly through the silence of the forest. Ryan led the group around the spires of tree trunks, carefully stepping over sprawling roots. Eli tripped beneath the foliage, and Logan pulled him back to his feet. Miller looked back and forth as he ran, scanning the endless expanse of trees with his rifle. No matter how far they ran, the only sound came from their rattling equipment, panting breath, and muffled footsteps. Ryan's heart hammered against his rib cage. His pulse throbbed. He didn't understand why the jungle had become silent, but it was terrifying, and he wanted to get away from the silence as quickly as he could. He saw Eli take a swig from his flask, gasping for air as he ran. Ryan knew that his fear was carrying him away. He was being too paranoid, running from phantoms in the dark. He was ashamed of his fear, for letting the others get spooked because of his own paranoia. So he let go of his breath and slowed down. His boots hit the ground heavily, and he trudged to a stop at the bottom of a short hill. He panted and looked over his shoulder at the rest of the squad a few meters back. In his own fear, he had nearly left them behind. He felt pathetic. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Ryan steadied his breathing and listened to the silence. The buzz of tinnitus filled his ears. He doubled over with his hands on his knees and stared at the ground. His panting respirations seemed abnormally loud. He looked up and studied the darkness. The beams of the squad's flashlights were swinging and intersecting over Ryan's head. As his breathing slowed down, he began to detect a deep, rumbling bass beneath his respirations. Ryan's eyes widened and his muscles tensed. Something else was breathing. Ryan was wrenched off of his feet and he hit the ground face first. He screamed for help as he was dragged through the undergrowth, away from his squad. Something had his ankle in a vice grip. He could feel teeth digging into his skin through the canvas of his boots. Ryan shouted and kicked blindly. The stalks and stems of the undergrowth flew past in a dark blur of green. He grabbed at the earth and pulled up handfuls of damp soil. His attacker snorted and hissed. He felt its deep growl resonating through his bones. Ryan screamed again as he heard the others, frighteningly far away, shouting after him. Their voices were fading past. Ryan flailed, twisted his torso, and rolled onto his back, briefly kicking his attacker in the face. All he saw of his attacker was a black blur. Ryan craned his neck and met the tawny eyes of the predator. Its jaws were locked around his boot, and its fangs were hooked through the fabric. Ryan yelled and kicked the creature's snout, but it swiped its claws and nearly ripped his throat open. He swung his pistol at the creature and fired a shot at it. The creature growled lowly, a powerful rumble that shook Ryan's vision, and it squeezed its jaws. Ryan couldn't muster any thoughts. His head was hollow and swimming with adrenaline. He screamed, and bullets suddenly tore through the foliage around him. The creature yowled as lead scraped its skin. Footsteps pounded over, and more gunshots flashed. The creature snarled and looked deeply into Ryan's eyes, seeing into him, seeing through him. With one last painful squeeze of its jaws, the creature let go of Ryan and turned around, swinging a long, stiff tail past his face. The creature towered over him on muscular legs and shrieked horrifically at the others. Blood flecked from its howling maw. Somebody screamed, and more gunshots filled the air. The creature turned and dove back beneath the foliage, sprinting away. Ryan scrambled to his feet, winced painfully, and saw that the creature was gone. As quickly as it had appeared, it had vanished into the forest.
"What the fuck was that?"
Miller yelled, looking back and forth.
"I never seen nothing like that. Did anybody see where it went?"
"Fuck if I know," Gerald replied.
"It was, what, 8, 10 feet tall?"
Leon asked.
"Shit, it looks like a giant turkey if you ask me,"
Eli said.
"Good thing nobody asked you,"
Gerald said.
"Whatever it was, it's gone now,"
Ryan said. He let go of a shuddering breath and took a plaintive step. His ankle was throbbing and sore, but it would heal. He reclaimed his car 15 from the undergrowth.
"Come on, let's keep moving. I need to get as much distance between us and whatever that thing was as quickly as possible."
"It's not that easy," Xavier said gravely. He walked up to Ryan and looked at his ankle, then crouched and examined the forest floor for footprints.
"What do you mean?"
Ryan asked.
"Whatever it was, it's not scared of people,"
Xavier said. He ran his fingers along the length of a nearly imperceptible footprint in the soil.
"If it's like most man-eaters, it won't be scared to come back to claim its meal. We need to get out of its territory before it follows your scent."
"How big do you think its territory would be?" Ryan asked.
"I would guess 60 square miles if it's a tiger," Xavier said. "So easily all of this valley. I don't think we'll be getting away from it as long as we're here."
"Well, at least it knows that we aren't an easy meal," Ryan said.
"Let's move. We need to find a safe place to set up camp. We'll keep moving in the morning."
Ryan raised his rifle and hobbled forward, following his compass northeast. The others trailed after him and surveyed the forest over the barrels of their rifles. Leon stared wide-eyed at the jungle canopy and heard the distant, echoing shriek of the creature reverberating through the valley. The shriek was answered by a similar call, and then another, until the valley seemed to be filled with the otherworldly scream. Whatever had attacked Ryan was not alone. You've been listening to Primitive War, Written by Ethan Pettis. Read for you by Wayne June. Copyright 2017 by Ethan Pettis. Production copyright 2020 by Ethan Pettis.